Welcome. Today, we're taking a closer look at a pretty significant development in international cooperation, an initiative that's known as the Priority Ukraine Request List. So, back in the first few weeks of January 2026, a really key announcement came out of Kyiv from Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky. He was laying out the latest status of a defense initiative that had been quietly taking shape over the last several months. And this wasn't just a routine update. No, this announcement signaled a formal and pretty notable shift in the whole structure of how international military support was being sent to the country. At the very heart of the announcement was a number, 24. President Zelensky stated that this was the current count of nations that were actively participating in this one specific, coordinated effort. And the goal of this effort was crystal clear: to make it easier to purchase American-made weapon systems, all intended for Ukraine's defense. During his speech, President Zelensky actually made a point to give a specific thanks to two nations in particular, Romania and Croatia. He formally named them as the newest countries to join this growing group, and he noted that they had just recently made their first official financial contributions to the whole effort. And right alongside the update on the number of partner nations, a major financial figure was also put out there. The total contributions from all the participating countries had at that point hit a combined total of $4.3 billion. This number represented the total financial commitment to the program since it first started. So what this announcement really made clear was a fundamental change from the way things used to be. It created a direct official channel for Ukraine to get its hands on very specific kinds of weapons. For example, think about those vital interceptor missiles for Patriot air defense systems. Well, now they could be bought directly from United States stockpiles, and the bill would be covered by this collective fund from all those international partners. But to really understand why this is such a big deal, we need to look a little closer at how this new initiative actually works, why it was even created in the first place, and what the world of military support looked like before it existed at all. Okay, let's start with the official name for this new setup. It's called the Priority Ukrainian Request List. And like a lot of these programs, it usually just goes by its acronym, PURL. That name itself gives you a pretty good clue about what it does. It's all about priorities, requests, and a very specific list. So officially, PURL is defined as a rapid support mechanism. Let's break that down a bit. It was a joint initiative started by the United States and NATO. Its main function, the whole reason it exists, is to create a new pathway. It lets those 24 partner nations use their money to directly fund Ukraine's purchase of weapons. And here's the critical part. These weapons come straight from existing U.S. stockpiles. The whole thing is designed to be a streamlined, fast-tracked channel for military aid that gets around a lot of the old, complex. Now, this program isn't just for any old military supplies. It is laser-focused on very specific, high-priority equipment, the stuff that's been identified as the most urgent need. This list includes things like advanced air defense systems, which are obviously crucial for protecting cities and infrastructure. It includes a steady supply of essential ammunition, because without that, the best systems are useless. And it covers critical spare parts, the little things needed to keep complex equipment running. To be even more specific, it directly helps them get interceptor missiles for Patriot systems and guided rockets for HIMARS systems, two of the most critical tools in Ukraine's entire arsenal. So why does this specific program matter so much right now? Well, because it represents a huge shift toward a much more streamlined and responsive way of boosting Ukraine's defenses. It didn't just appear out of nowhere. It really fits into this broader period where the strategies for international support were themselves being reevaluated and, evolving. For a while, there had been this recognized need, something people talked about a lot, for more speed and better coordination in delivering the most critical aid. The PURL program was designed to be a direct, practical answer to that exact problem. Now, to really appreciate just how big of a shift this program is, we need to step back for a moment. We have to reconstruct what the normal world of military support looked like before this initiative was put in place back in mid-2025. What was that landscape like? What were the accepted ways of doing things? And what were the challenges? Before the PURL program came along, the system was just fundamentally different. Aid would typically show up in the form of separate, individual packages from different countries. And while those contributions were incredibly important, that model had its own built-in challenges. Just imagine, every single partner nation was working on its own domestic timeline. Each one had its own approval processes, its own budget cycles, its own rules for procurement, and its own logistics for delivery. The job of trying to coordinate dozens of these independent, unsynchronized efforts was just enormously complex. It often led to these unpredictable delivery schedules, where a critical piece of hardware might arrive, but the ammunition for it, coming from a totally different country, could be weeks or even months behind. And for a long time, that was just the accepted reality. It was just understood by everyone involved that getting equipment was a complicated, slow process that involved a lot of different independent sources. It was just taken for granted that getting aid meant navigating this whole web of different national procedures, each with its own quirks and timelines. This kind of patchwork system wasn't really seen as a failure. It was just the established normal. It was simply the way things were done. It wasn't really questioned because it was the only framework that anyone had. It was just seen as the stable, if sometimes clunky, way of providing international support. So now, let's get into the specifics of how this new program actually works on the inside. So this wasn't just about more money, but a different way of doing things?
That's exactly right. While the money is obviously what makes the whole thing go, the real innovation of PURL wasn't just the cash. It was the creation of a totally new structure. Think of it less like a bigger pipeline and more like a completely redesigned plumbing system. It's a mechanism that was built from the ground up for two things: speed and specificity. It wasn't just designed to increase the total amount of aid, but to change how that aid was targeted and delivered. The main goal was to move away from that patchwork model and centralize everything around a single, unified priority list, and then to create a direct, clear supply line to meet those needs as fast as possible.
Who actually manages the money from all these different countries? That's a really key question. The money from all the partner nations isn't sent individually. Instead, all the contributions are coordinated and pooled into one special, dedicated fund. And the management of that central fund is handled by NATO, which kind of acts as the trusted coordinator for the whole group. NATO's job is to then take the request from that priority list, the one provided by Ukraine, and use the money in that fund to handle the purchases directly from the United States. So the process is, partners put money in the fund, NATO manages it, and the purchases are made based on what Ukraine says it needs most. Okay, so now that we understand the mechanics, let's walk through the actual timeline of the PURL program. How did it go from just an idea to a system that's up and running? We'll trace its development, step by step, from the very beginning to where it is today. The story of this program really kicks off in the summer of 2025. In July of that year, the initiative was formally launched by the US and NATO. This wasn't some secret meeting. It was a formal introduction of a new concept. The whole framework was presented to partner nations as this new mechanism, a new way of thinking about providing coordinated support. It was the moment the idea was officially put on the table for everyone to look at. How long did it take to get started? Well, the pace was actually really fast, which was, one of its main goals. The formal implementation of the program began the very next month, in August of 2025. That was the phase where they turned the idea into a working system, and things moved quickly from there. By September 2025, just 2 months after it was launched, the theory became a reality. The very first shipments of military equipment bought and paid for through the PURL program had physically arrived in Ukraine. As the program started to prove it could work through that fall, something started to change. Toward the end of the year, there was this huge, sudden jump in financial support. It's a really interesting detail that nearly $1.5 billion, a huge chunk of the total, was raised in the single month of December 2025 alone. This big surge in funding at the end of the year showed that partner confidence was growing, and it made up a really substantial part of the total money that had been raised up to that point. Were there a few large donors, or was it widespread? The answer is that the support was really widespread. It didn't just come from 1 or 2 big donors. To give you an idea of how broad the coalition was, we can look at some of the contribution numbers that were made public. For instance, the Netherlands committed a very large amount, around $545 million. The Scandinavian partners were also deeply involved. Sweden put in about $275 million, Norway committed around $135 million, and Denmark's contribution was about $85.3 million. And those are just 4 examples, but they show you that the financial backing came from a diverse group of countries, both large and small, which really reflects a broad base of support for the whole idea. And so, after tracing how it all developed, we arrive at today. So let's just calmly summarize the situation as it is right now, with this new initiative having become a fully established and working system. What we now understand is that PURL is no longer an experiment. It's a functioning, established, multilateral system. It's a new model for aid. It works because of collective funding from many partner nations. That money is coordinated through a single NATO-managed fund, and that in turn creates a direct supply line from existing U.S. stockpiles. The entire flow is guided by Ukraine's own stated priorities, and the whole structure is designed for one thing above all: rapid delivery. It's really not an exaggeration to say that this has fundamentally changed the method by which critical military aid is delivered in this situation. And yet, behind all the mechanics of funds and logistics, there's a much larger stated goal. As Ukraine's president put it, the ultimate aim of this initiative is to move closer to the goal of peace and to ensure security not just for Ukraine, but for Europe as a whole. And this is a really crucial point to reflect on. It shows that while the PURL program is, at its heart, a very practical tool for getting crucial equipment where it needs to go, it's seen by everyone involved as just one part of a much larger, ongoing effort, an effort with a far broader and more profound goal. And so, this leaves us with a final, quiet, and reflective thought. How will this new model, this template for collective, rapid reaction funding, which has now been proven to work, how will it shape the structure of international support in other situations down the road? The question of its potential and its broader implications, well, that remains.